Yes, we're on.
100%. Good morning to everyone who's joined us on the call. Welcome to our iTOOsday being Drones for Good, protecting the lives. I must always say it's always interesting to hear what drones are doing out there and for the goodness of our people and keeping our communities as safe. With us today for iTOOsday, I've got Kim James, from who's one of the co-founders and one of the directors of UAV Aerial Works, who will be taking us through what she is doing and what she's seen in the drone space. Kim has got some extensive experience working within the drone community itself. She's got +7 years experience working with drones. I think, and she comes with a common name named the DroneChick. So it does tell you that Kim James has been around the drone community for as much time, and she's seen the drone industry evolve from what it was back in 2015 to what it currently is in 2024. And I think in this call itself, Kim will give us an opportunity or a glimpse from what she thinks or where she thinks the drone industry itself is heading, as she works with mainly in the security space, but she's got extensive knowledge or a good background in terms of what other industries she's seeing drones being deployed. Furthermore, as well, I'd like to introduce my colleague Nonhlanhla, who's sitting next to me. She will also be taking us through the presentation and taking us through the importance of having drone insurance as a drone client itself. So seeing the time is at 10:02, I was thinking we can give another minute for more of our brokers to come and join on the call. So because it is an interesting topic and we obviously do want to keep it within the time frame, so I don't want us to hold as much time. So we'll give more people, Kim, a minute or so for additional brokers to join, and then I'll hand it over to you. Something which I'd just like to let the people know, I spent the better half of last week with Kim James and Stellenbosch at a Drones in Disaster Management conference, where we got taken through what the drone technology is aiding in drones in disaster management scenarios. So which is something really interesting which I found from the conference. I hope you'll also be sharing some of your learnings from the conference itself. I know you were also panelists. Great insight and great always hearing you talk there.
Thanks, Kapano, and thanks for having me on. It's a great privilege, and I can see the numbers steadily rising here. So you've obviously got a good audience. So I'm looking forward to it. It was really good to see you in Stellenbosch. It was great. It was a good conference.
Definitely. Looking at the time, it is that minute is gone through. I think, Kim, without wasting any more time, I'm going to hand over to you, and then Nonhlanhla obviously will come after your presentation to share obviously her insights in terms of the importance of drone insurance. So without wasting any more time, and thank you to all the brokers who've joined us from wide and across our country in South Africa. I'm hoping you're as excited to hear what we've got for you in today's presentation. And just a little bit of house rules. We will let Kim James go through her presentation, and then around about 22:11, we'll have Nonhlanhla Nkosi come in and do her presentation herself. All the questions and answers, we will be taking them through. You can share questions and answers through the chat box. Lorenzo and myself will be watching the questions on the side, and then we'll open up the panel towards the end of the presentations. If you want to interact, or you found you couldn't find the words and you just want to answer the question live, we have more than happy for you to do that. Otherwise, we're happy for you to also share questions in the chat box. So without wasting any more time, over to you, Kim, and looking forward to your presentation. Best.
Thank you so much, Kapano. Let me do the honors here. Right. You should see a great big white screen with Drones for Good on it. Can I just have a firm on that? Can you see my screen?
We've got you on the side. Thank you, Kim.
Oh, perfect. Okay. There's always that awkward silence waiting for confirm. Well, I was asked to talk about Drones for Good. And what does that actually mean? Drones have been around since the Second World War, used in military. This is not a new thing. But Drones for Good in the context of social impact in the context of growing emphasis of this technology replacing dirty, dull, and dangerous jobs has become something that's synonymous with loads of industries. And if anyone hasn't heard of a drone, where have you been? You can see drones in macro, or you can see drones on CNN or whatever news channel you choose to watch in this dreadful conflict or dreadful conflicts that we're witnessing at the moment. And the crazy thing is, you know, depending on what side you're on, they would be deemed good too. So I thought, since I'm told that most of this audience is in the broker field or community, I'll kind of try and steer where I can. Let me just see. Okay, apparently you can see some notes which have slipped in there from previous conversations. Okay, let me just flick forward. Are you still seeing my notes? Anyway, I don't know why that would be. So I thought I would just take you guys through where we've come from in South Africa. This is a fairly new industry from a commercial or organized perspective. And in South Africa, we were the first to actually formalize regulations in 2015. So we're kind of, I think, 8 years in, almost 9 years in, if my math serves me. So right now, we, and I wonder why this, why you guys are not seeing the slides that I'm actually showing on. Sorry, guys, let's just do this again. Great, when you're working with two screens, it's always fabulous, hey? Just bear with me. Okay. Is that better, Connor?
Perfect. Thank you.
Cool. Right. I've got fancy new screens, so working in tech, hey? Who knew? All right. So 2015 is where it all kicked off in South Africa. We were the first in South Africa, in the world, as South Africans, as a civil aviation authority, to actually formalize and promulgate drone regulations. So we were kind of at the forefront of this. A lot of people, you know, do kind of give the CAA a hard time. But I always put myself in their shoes and I think, well, what, you know, if we were in their shoes, we would have to choose a way, and they chose this way. And so that's what we've started from, and that's what we're evolving from. So right now, if we want to operate a drone legally for commercial purposes, and commercial at this point in time, and there are kind of challenges to this definition, but at this point in time, commercial is anything that is deemed for profit, interest, or gain. So anything other than private operations, and I'll get to that in a second, has to essentially meet these regulations. So the operator needs an air services license unless it's a corporate or a not-for-profit operator. We need a Department of Transport air service license. We then need to get the Part 101 certification. It's an operator certificate. In our case, it took 2.5 years. It doesn't take that long anymore, but it is arduous. A lot of people will say it's a barrier to entry. The aircraft or the drone has to be registered. It goes through a registration process. It goes through a letter of approval process, and then it goes onto the organization's operation specification. This process can take up to 3 or 4 months, and it is not anything that can run in parallel. It is linear. So you have to wait for the certificate of registration, which gives us a ZT number. and that gets renewed every year. With that, you then apply for the letter of approval, and once you have that, it can go on the operation specification, and then you can use it. So commercially, if we're sitting with the $500,000 or R1 million worth of drones, and we are putting this through this process, we can't operate it. We write those units off for financials over, a contract over 2 years, and then they're sitting in a storeroom, not operational. So there definitely are frustrations from an operator perspective. We then need to have licensed, trained and licensed crew. So the drone pilot has to be registered. They have, under this operator, they have to do a remote pilot certificate. It used to be called an RPL, a license, but there's been some alignment with ICAO. So operating an uncrewed aircraft system or vehicle requires a remote pilot certificate. And then there are endorsements like fixed wing ratings, BBLOS ratings, etc. All of this costs money, of course, and takes time. And then, of course, with all of that, operational safety comes into play, and this is where kind of operations start, where you need to be able to navigate controlled airspace, issue NOTAMs, etc., etc. But we learn all of this when we start operating. And then, of course, you add real operations to it. So that license that gets issued, that doesn't mean that the individual is now ready to actually operate a very expensive drone. They still need operation in-field training. Operations management really deals with the complexities of any operation. We have to deal with incident and accident. We monitor all of that. We have to do safety training, and then there's keeping all of that crew current. So that almost is the starting point for an operation. What can we do currently in terms of our regulations, and what does the future look like? By the way, some of this is thumbstuck, some of this is, kind of wishful thinking. But right now, one pilot, one drone. That is what we're allowed to do. That's what the regulations allow. We do have automated flight, and there is a difference between automated and autonomous. So we do already see drone in the box. It is an automated drone operation. So when you see adverts or people saying that it is autonomous, it is not autonomous. Automated means you're essentially programming a route or a flight. The drone executes that flight by essentially coming out of its box, following waypoints, and returns to the box, and that's where it charges. So why is this important? It's important because it's going to take the pilot out of the field. It's going to take vehicles out of the field, and it's actually going to make drone operations more efficient, cost efficient, safe, etc. We're very excited about this. In our space and security, I'm not convinced yet with the current tools that are available, but this is what we can do now by regulation. Automated flights from a drone in the box perspective are approved by the Civil Aviation Authority on a case-by-case basis by a safety case on a site. So an operator basically needs to prove their safety case on their client site or for themselves. There is already swarming that's been approved. I believe there's an operator or two that can do this, mainly in the agricultural space with crop spraying, where one pilot can operate a number of drones that are coordinated with GPS. In my opinion, the CAA most likely is comfortable with that, given the fact that it's low and slow operation. But that is certainly what we need to be moving to, even in our space, from a security perspective. It's more effective if you can operate multiple drones with one pilot. Zipline has done that. That is what they built their safety case for, amongst others, and they are now in the US getting their operations approved there. Then, I don't know how long this is going to take. I've just made this up, 2025 plus, I don't know, but autonomous flight must be the future. Autonomous in its true sense is really, can a drone make decisions, intelligent decisions, without human? And right now that is not possible. When I say it's not possible, it is, but have we tried and tested it? Can it do what we need it to do? Right now it's not regulated. I guess we're all working on some form of machine learning model, and that is what will get us there. And then, of course, future, who knows when. We're talking about passenger drones. This is urban air mobility. You might hear of some of those things being mentioned. And then, of course, large cargo drones. With our road and rail network, makes sense, right? There are a lot of people investing a lot of time and money to try and get that off the ground. I love that. But yeah, right now, this is where we are. Okay, so what's the lay of the land in South Africa? These numbers are hot off the press. Capano heard them. We've had this validated from one of the CIA heads of units, who was also on the panel with me. And, you know, as operators, we often have a lot to say about the Civil Aviation Authority, because it is frustrating to maneuver the processes. And he sat right next to me, and my good friend Sam Twala, who facilitated the panel, kind of said, so Kim, as an operator, do you see the CIA as your friend or foe? And I was like, friend, obviously. And we had a little joke about it. But the CIA doesn't always share statistics easily. And so these are the latest hot off the press, according to the CIA. Since 2015, we have had approved in the industry 99 commercial operators. So you guys might have heard RPL, ROC, anything with an R is now replaced by UAS. So it's an unmanned aerial system operator certificate. So that's a big mouthful. We have 3,487 registered drones. Okay, those are according to the CIA that are on the underneath or under or on an operator. Basically, I have 6,099 certified drone pilots. We have 28 aviation training organizations that are specific to the drone world. And depending on whose articles you read that reference and what have you, and depending on, you know, what it is that white paper or that article is intending to do, the numbers are vastly different. But according to some articles, the estimated drone industry size could be 2.5 billion rand by 2025. And are we going to get that out of these numbers? I'm not sure. And I don't know what that's based on. There's no clarity really. Suffice to say, tech, it's evolving and we should be using more of it. So what we don't have here, if you're already thinking it, you should be, is, again, depending on who you speak to, there's no registration of this. But people estimate there to be 40 to 50,000 hobby drones in South Africa. And this would constitute the private operators. And what can private operators do? Private operators in South Africa can pretty much do nothing. They can maybe take the drone off in their backyard. But there is a private operator. I'm very happy to the guys at iTOO who can share it. It is publicly available. It is on the website. They basically can operate during the day with landowner permission, only as far and as high, I'm summarizing this hugely, as their nearest highest obstacle, not at night, not near people, property and public roads, not 50 meters, within 50 meters of property, and not within 10 kilometers of an aerodrome. So pretty much when people ask me, so where can I operate? I'll be like, you can operate at a SAMA field, not operate, but you can fly at a SAMA field, which is the Model Aircraft Association fields, and probably on a farm in the middle of nowhere. Definitely not in controlled airspace. So this is for you guys and girls, obviously a huge missing piece, because if the operator is not registered with the CAA under Part 101, they can't make money out of this. So, and they can't get third-party liability insurance, and they can't be insured, basically, once that drone takes off. So it's a huge missed opportunity here. So let's put this into perspective, though. We give ourselves a hard time in South Africa because you guys are probably all sitting there going, what? Like, how are we not letting these operators operate, et cetera, et cetera. I've been in the US last year in October. I've been in Ireland in March. I had great expectations of seeing how much further they are as countries, as aviators, as drone industries than we are. And I was super surprised. So if we think about our 6,900 pilots, we think, but according to, like in comparison with the US and the UK, that have got almost, you know, like the UK has got over 500,000 pilots, and you think that's crazy. Where are we in this world? But when you wash that over the population and you go, okay, so per capita, everyone is still under 1%. I know we're like way, way off, but we're still under, everyone's under 1% of the population. So I just like the slide because it puts it into perspective. And then when you look at drones, still everyone's under 1% of the population in terms of the numbers of registered drones. And if you look at the numbers of pilots and drones in the US, for example, the US, and again, I'm not a specialist in the US market, but from the people I know, oftentimes it's an individual operator with 1 or 2 drones, and they've done their online exam and they can operate. So we should probably be moving to something like that. Interestingly, Ireland, they speak, you know, kind of very frustratingly about their world. So the EU regulations have changed in Ireland, and this comes out of the horse's mouth from one of my industry friends who operates in Ireland. He is one of these 16,000 pilots, registered pilots. They used to be able to just operate in an open category. You've got your drone, do a little online thing, you're done. And he said, and then people did stupid stuff. And now they have to follow the EU directive, and they're bringing it in and they're tightening up. And people are going out of business because they can't afford now to comply. So they started out open and they've made the regulations more stringent. And we started the other way around. So I don't know what's better. But I hope you agree that this makes us feel a little bit better about where we are. We're not light years behind. I'll add one more thing. As an operator in South Africa, we have been operating beyond visual line of sight, which means we can operate the drone further than 500 meters from the controller. We've been operating at night. We've been operating over people, property, and public roads in controlled airspace. And in all of these markets, and by the way, Australia is another big one. They're quite similar in numbers to the UK. For years, we've been operating in this way. So this is not my description, but someone in the industry described it as we have a very deep ops spec. So if we're lucky enough and we work hard enough and we can get our operator's certificate, we can actually do some cool stuff. In the US, they're still celebrating if they get an exemption to operate at night or to do a BVLOS flight. So I'm just putting that into perspective. Right, where are we in terms of drones for good and what are we doing with them? I'm going to use an industry use case covering security first. It's very high level stuff. given time, but that's because that's my world and I like it, and that's where I spend every waking minute of my day operating. So we talk, I see that's an interesting word. Okay, so we talk about mining, we talk about industrial sites, we're protecting high value assets, mainly night shifts, very, very labor intensive, lots of people out in the field in dangerous environments, over people, property and public roads. And that looks something like this. So normally the teams are outside, exposed, they're guarded by security armed guards, they are watching a screen. And this is where we need to get more automated and also more autonomous, I guess, where the machine needs to call the pilot or the security, rather than us actually staring at screens. You know, this could be in a control room somewhere, but this is now a beyond visual line of sight VTOL operation. These are multi-rotor operations, but that's kind of what it looks like. Thousands and thousands and thousands of flights per month, securing communities, which essentially saves communities, because, you know, if a mine, which is actually the provider of jobs and livelihoods in an area, if those mines get stolen, rotten and empty, and they shut down, those communities will suffer. So, and oftentimes crime hits those communities just as bad. So that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing in that space. Obviously, there's the whole other world of war and what have you, but in the commercial space in South Africa, mining is mining and farming protection is the biggest piece. And in my humble opinion, and from what I know, this is probably the biggest employment provider industry in the drone space in South Africa. So secondly, engineering, inspection, surveying. This is for construction sites, for mines, also around disaster preparedness, disaster response, risk management, pre and post loss. So we just spent time in Cape Town, as Capano said, really digging deep and understanding what global communities are doing to assist with disasters, but also to prepare for disasters where, you know, in Nepal, for example, lots of earthquakes, you know, in some African countries, lots of flooding. So these inspections and surveys go very far in terms of gathering information and being able to use that information for good. Of course, from a, you know, data gathering perspective, absolutely, that makes sense. But also drones can be useful for communication during disasters, you know, kind of spreading messages, delivering messages. And, you know, in some instances, there's been talk on, you know, actually delivering goods that traditionally has been done by helicopters, for example, but, you know, food and rescue items, etc. So in that space, lots of work being done. Really, it's not about the drone, it's about the payload. And I think you guys would know, if any one of you insures engineers who have LiDARs on their drones, the cameras, those payloads are worth more than the actual drone. So the drone is really the carrier of that tool. In this case, you know, in the kind of engineering day job perspective, they're generally day shifts, but these guys also go into dangerous environments. And I'll show you now some of those examples. So this is kind of what that space looks like. Bottom left is actually good industry friends of ours who did the post-loss survey at the Cape Town fire, at that library. They do a lot of stuff, you know, where there are integrity issues, structural integrity issues. They do a lot of underground stuff, which obviously from an regulation perspective is irrelevant here, but they have cool drones that work underground. So that's typically what an operation would look like. But also, the drones get hammered. They are on mines with fine dust, and you can just imagine the risk that you're ensuring there. But yeah, so I thought that was interesting to show you. And then agriculture is a big one. Crop assessment, this is where you would use a drone with special payloads to try and read into the health of a plant. There are lots of cool tech company, well, there's a few, but there's one in Maine which was actually born out of South Africa. Very, very cool tech, and they speak about AI, where they literally do flights, gather data, and they can do yield predictions, yield assessments. And then, of course, based on that data, the crop spraying comes into place, where crop sprayers can either release pesticides, herbicides, or even fertilizers, etc. In this space, it's heavy equipment. The pilots have to be trained to use and apply pesticides or chemicals. This is a huge, huge industry growth that we've seen. And this is kind of what it looks like. So again, big, heavy equipment. The rigs that the guys use are massive. I actually don't have a picture. There are lots. You can go Google them if you haven't seen them. But, if you just see the humans, well, actually, you can see the guys over here standing on the rig just to get some height. But this is kind of the latest DJI drone. And there are others that are coming into South Africa that are competitors to DJI now as well. And so you can see these different applications, different drones, different working environment. This working environment, they'll also be outside in the heat and the mosquitoes and all of that beautiful stuff. So when people say, I want to be a drone pilot, and I say to them, do you know what you're getting yourself in for, or letting yourself in for? That's kind of it. So what aircraft do you see? I mean, of course, they can be any shapes and sizes, but in South Africa, this is what we'd probably be seeing on a daily, actually. So DJI at this point is still the majority supplier of drones and batteries and equipment. They've done a very, very good job at designing a really cool piece of equipment, cool tech. I call it the Apple of the drone industry. It's a nice closed system. You can't get into it. Once the batteries are done, once the drone's end of life, you're done. So there's definitely a big move in our industry anyway, to maybe diversify and manage business risk. But this is what we still, at this point, until we're going to replace this with our own. But the DJI M30 and the T is the thermal. This is kind of the replacement for the M300, which you guys saw in the engineering photo. And so from a risk perspective, it's come down kind of from the 9 kgs that the M300 was, more or less, to a 4 kg integrated payload. Very cool. We operate these to death. We have them on every single site. As we do these, the Mavics are a very, very clever design, quick to deploy. And the pilots love these. If we had both of them on site, they would use these. There are also other versions that can be used not only for thermal work, security work, but for there are RTK enabled modules, etc., etc. So, but just nice to see the difference. And then these are the VTOLs. This is our own quick plug, if I may. But the point is, for security and for longer range flight, that's kind of what you're looking at. The CAA is nervous about these. They can operate 15, 20 kilometers at 400 foot from the pilot at night. Some of them weigh 25 kilos. So with our airspace separation still not, you know, not automated or systematic, it is definitely a higher risk. And in our opinion, it's not more complicated to operate, but pilot error does occur. And then these babies over here, you guys would have probably seen them being talked about or operated, but the concept of a drone in the box really has kind of changed people's view and you know, kind of ability to operate drones. And the idea here is that even though this still needs to be plugged into mains, but it's really low maintenance. I talked about it earlier on. So lots of people are actually considering the use of a dock. This really benefits being able to take the pilots and the vehicles out of the field. And if it was a plug and play scenario, you'd literally place this on a site, plug it in, and it would just do its automated missions. And so this is really good, in my humble opinion, for surveys that need to be redone, progress reports, etc. This is really good. That same mission every day, twice a day, or whatever. And then the flight cart, which addresses drone deliveries. And again, in my humble opinion, DJI has this down to a T, where whatever the next thing is that's going to come along, they put it out. And even if it's not perfect, but they've created a market, and they've created people that have now still you know, been committed to the ecosystem, the DJI ecosystem. So I believe there is an operator that is using this. I think they're in the Western Cape. I haven't seen it myself, but of course it has to go that way. Drone deliveries make complete sense. So you will already be insuring these or have clients that will come to you for these. And so hopefully that's just given you a bit of an overview. So what about the risks then? And again, let's assume that we're talking about people who have been trained, that work in the environment from a commercial perspective. And you know, if I listen to the brokers and I listen to you guys in this space, I hear pilot error. And in my operation, we try absolutely everything to reduce that. I don't know what your stats are, but I thought I would just share the reality. And this is from my perspective. I don't know anyone in the industry that's actually doing this. So I'm just going to flick this up quickly. But based on like over 55,000 flights, I measure the occurrences per 1,000 flights. And I know in manned aviation, they work on, you know, million flight hours and 100,000 flight hours. We don't do that much yet. So I monitor the trends. I look at hazards, incidents, and accidents. And I'm very, very aware that pilot error, especially in the field, especially at night, especially in routine where the guys work every single night, they work rotations, that we are looking at reducing the accident rate. And so at this point in time, our accident rate is 0.24 accidents per 1,000 flights. And when I've shared this with the CAA, they're very impressed. I have no idea what everyone else's accident rates are. But this is all good and well. Okay, you know, some people might be freaking out, some people might not. But what I wanted to show you is I have now started splitting aircraft hazard incident and accidents from non-aircraft and vehicle, because our operations are not just drones. So the big point here for you guys to take away is that even in our operation where we were so on training and, you know, we think we're doing a great job, we still have pilot error. And even though we mitigate our hazards and our incidents are reviewed and we mitigate further, 78% of our accidents, even though the number isn't huge, but percentage-wise, are still aircraft related, and that's what you guys are ensuring. So, and by pilot error. And, you know, we essentially are exposed to weather and, you know, all sorts of other stuff, but pilot error and aircraft is where that consistent theme comes from. So I just wanted to touch on that. And that's because I'm mentioning autonomous operation, taking pilots out of the field, you know, especially in night work. It's shitty work. We want to try and make this better for them. So if we can take them out of the field, some of this might be addressed. So what is the future? We absolutely always have to remember that we have to make a special case for South Africa. We cannot just copy and paste what other people are doing in other countries, other regulators, excuse me. So we do have to think about remote operations. We have to take the pilot out of the field. When it comes to security, even some of the agriculture teams, drone teams, they get targeted. They get targeted for their drones, they get targeted for their vehicles, they get targeted for their phones. So if we can make remote operations more easily accessible from a regulation perspective and a safety case perspective, there's going to be less risk for you, there's going to be less risk for us. So that's absolutely where the future is. And from a regulation perspective, we are, as an industry, working on a categorization model. So right now we have, and that first slide that I showed you with all my beautiful notes, we have we subscribe to a certification model. So whether you're operating a 250-gram drone or a 30-kilogram drone or even higher, we are regulated by the same certification requirements. What the categorization model is going to be doing is to say, we're going to have different operating categories. And the biggest one that will be the biggest kind of, you know, benefit to the whole industry is going to be the open category, which will most likely very, very, you know, loosely be based on a risk model, which will say what operation are you going to do where and with what drone. You'd probably have, you know, a drone that's registered when it comes into the country or bought. We don't know that yet. There has to be some form of drone ID so that that drone can be identified, and the owner of the drone and operator of the drone identified. We have to have some form of separation, because right now we are on airband radios, manually separating ourselves from manned aircraft. And you'd probably have some form of online registration, pay-as-you-go insurance, and away you go. And from a broker community, it would literally be that, you know, industry of 40, 50,000 or maybe more private operator drones suddenly being commercially viable and, you know, legally used. And then, of course, you know, it's not yet regulated. I've said that a few times from an autonomous operation perspective. But I'm going to close off now. And this is just kind of a holding slide while I make my closing statement. But essentially, you would have had, or you will have, calls from farmers, from people who can walk into a DJI distributor and buy R1 million worth of equipment without actually knowing that they need to operate under a license. And they're going to call you and say, please insure my equipment. And you're not going to be able to for what they want to do. And it's highly frustrating because there's nothing we can do about it right now. This is where we operate. But the future is bright. I feel like we're on the right track, and, you know, we're all in it to gain in some way, shape, or form. So I thank you very much. I'm open for questions, but I think at this point I am handing over to Nonhlanhla. I think you're still on mute.
No, we still can't hear you. Nonhlanhla, please try unmuting your mic.
Okay, we can hear you now.
Apologies for that, everyone. We're just quickly trying to sort that out. Go back to your screen quickly. There we go.
Okay. All good now. Perfect. Okay, let me just put up my slides, 2 seconds. Okay. Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Nonhlanhla Nkosi, as Kopano has already mentioned. Just before we get into the importance of drone insurance, it is important to note that iTOO only covers commercially operated drones. We currently do not cover private use. So our iTOO commercial cover has 3 sections to it. Section 1 and 2 refers to the hull and the payloads, which refers to the asset part. This will cover you in respect of theft, loss, or damage to the actual assets and or the detachable payloads or spares that relate to the drone. Section 3 of our cover covers bodily injury and property damage to third parties. And because we are the best in the game, we will include the following extensions into our tailor-made policy. We've got noise liability and invasion of privacy, which is sub-limited to 200,000 rands. We also have spread of fire, which is sub-limited to 1 million rands. With regards to spread of fire, this can be increased, but this comes at a cost, and it is based on underwriter's discretion and additional underwriting information that we may require. So, why do you need drone insurance? As Kim has already mentioned, that we are seeing a growth in the drone insurance space with 2.5 billion predicted in the next year. So you do definitely need to have your drone insured. So our drone insurance provides you with financial protection. If you are in the drone insurance space, you know that drones can cost anything from 1 rand up to 5 million. And you do not want to find yourself in a situation where you have such high amounts of damages. Our cover ensures that you are financially protected while you focus on your operations without having to worry about the what ifs. Drone insurance is a regulatory requirement in respect of third-party liability. I think Kim also mentioned this. The South African Civil Aviation Authority requires all commercially registered drones to have third-party liability before they can operate. Our cover starts from 2 million and we can offer you up to 100 million depending on your operations and the risk. So each client and each risk is dealt on in merit. Drone insurance also provides you with credibility. So, for example, within the mining space, some contracts requires you to have a minimum of 80 million, and that can go up to 100 million. So it just ensures your client that should something happen, you have sufficient insurance in place. In terms of what could go wrong, 10% of drones in South Africa crash in their first flight. And this just shows that even the most experienced pilots do face risk that they cannot foresee or predict. So just to put this into perspective, we recently had an incident where the operator was operating their DJI M300 and it had some accessories and spares attached to it, which amounted to a value of about 460K. So all the equipment was stolen in an armed robbery. So in this scenario, the insured was contracted to acquire data with regards to a construction project that the contractor was appointed on. And while the vehicle was on the way, one of the vehicles that was containing all of this equipment was hijacked by two suspects who were heavily armed. So what iTOO did in this case, we appointed an independent investigator to investigate the facts of the matter, who subsequently provided us with facts that allowed for the claim to be settled in full. So this speaks to our section 1 and section 2 of the coverage. Just before I get into the other scenario, if you need more information on our coverage, you can refer to our YouTube channel where we've done previous iTOOsdays, getting into detail on what we cover. And you can also refer to our policy wording, which can be found on our website, iTOO.co.za. We also had an incident where the insured was providing security surveillance on a mine next to an informal settlement. So on one evening, while the operator was doing their flight, they spotted a suspicious vehicle driving towards the settlement that the pilot was operating next to. The pilots descended to about 30 meters and started to video record the footage when the drone was subsequently shot down. Shortly thereafter, the pilots received an error message on their screen that the aircraft has been disconnected. And at this stage, the operator and some other security guys could hear a lot of joyous cheering from the informal settlement that is situated next to the mine. They tried searching for the drone and they were not able to cover it. This incident triggered our whole war risk extension, which is part and parcel of the policy. Okay. While the next video that I'm gonna play highlights what could go wrong during an operation, please note that current regulation does not allow the use of drones in areas where does not allow the use of drones in races where there are crowds in place. Enjoy the video. This goes to show that what could go wrong can actually go wrong. While we're still on what iTOO covers, if you have a client that is domiciled in South Africa and they are contracted to do operations, say in Kenya, Eswatini, our cover does extend to cover them if they are within the yellow and the green zones. With respect to the red zone, we prefer that you approach us first just to confirm if the cover does extend to those territories. Also, before your client can operate, they need to obtain confirmation from the local authority. So if they are operating in Eswatini, they would need to confirm get confirmation from Eswatini Civil Aviation Authority that they are allowed to operate in their airspace, and then provide that to us, and then cover will kick in. Before we wrap up, remember to insure your drone so that you can ensure your future with the best in the game. And our comprehensive policy created with drone enthusiasts, including one of our own, Kopano Tolo, who you saw in the beginning, who is currently pursuing his FPC so he can fly these guys, and professionals in mind. We do offer you the best coverage. You can contact us on the below details, and we can allow for some questions now.
Thanks a lot, Noni and Kim. I think that was a really great, interesting presentation. I do note that there are some questions which some brokers did ask on the chat box. And then we'll be going through those questions currently now with those. So Lorenzo will be helping us with reading out some of those questions on the side. Lorenzo, would you share some of the questions we received?
100%. Thank you, Kavana. Okay, so we have a few questions here. And let's see. Okay, let's start off with Adam Sneyman. So we are an NPC, a non-profit company, SANBS. Does that mean we do need the full process? I'm sure this is with regards to the licensing of the drone.
Yes. So on that one, as a non-profit corporation, you would need the full licensing to be in place. I do note that as a non-profit corporation operating, the only license regulation that you wouldn't require is an air service license. However, you would need to operate under an RPAS operating certificate, which is currently called now an unmanned aerial certificate. Unmanned aerial systems operating certificate, and you would need your drone to be registered under the Civil Aviation Authority, and the pilots who would be operating the drone need to be registered with the South African Civil Aviation with an RPC.
Fantastic. And then we have one here from Renee Duplessis asking, if you see illegal flying, where do you report it?
You want to give that to Kim?
Can I give that to you, because we did have this conversation?
Okay, so you should report it to the CAA. They do need to know about illegal drone operations. The first thing they're going to ask you, though, is like, what's the registration number of the drone and who's operating it? And you may not know. So there are enforcement procedures that the CAA has, and the CAA website does have that process. But there was a lot of work done recently on actually getting charge codes registered with SAPS. So if there is evidence, you can go and report it at a police station. I speak under correction, I think maybe 28 charge codes. But they would know, they'd be able to put in their system, and they would say, okay, what's the charge? What's the complaint? And then they would be able to follow that process. Obviously, like any other process, and we spoke about this with iTOO yesterday, they're going to need evidence. So the challenge with drones is that you might see the drone, but you don't know where the operator is. It's difficult, and I don't know what the answer is, but basically CAA and SAPS.
Fantastic. Thank you, Kim. We've got one here from Ryan also. Morning all, please advise possible cover restrictions for estate agents operating drones. I think this would be more with regard to the third party or the structure itself, if I'm not mistaken. But over to you.
So with the real estate agents, I do note that estate agents do require licensing to be in place, especially in their operation environment. So if you have a look when an estate agent would operate, they mainly operate over people's private properties, and that would trigger a POPIA Act, because now you never know who is, if the property owner does agree to you having some of their the images of their house on their website are used for advertising purposes, because mainly estate agents, when they try doing these nice aerial shots, you're actually taking not just the house that you're trying to sell or the house that you're trying to review, but you're taking an area, you're taking a couple of houses around that block as well. Furthermore, you never know who is, if the property owner is probably outside. I like using the idea, if the person is probably doing a tan or something outside. So you would be invading the person's privacy, and mainly estate agents would be operating under business, it would be a business use. So you're using a drone to enhance your business function. So you do need a license as an estate agent. You need an RPC, which is a pilot's license. You need your drone to be registered, and you need to fly under an RPAS operating certificate. So it is quite important for estate agents to have proper licensing in place.
Right. Thank you, Kapono. And then just 1 year, according to ICAO Annex 6, Part 4, makes categorization official and motivates the CAA to adopt the categorization model from JARUS or JARUS. How do you see this impacting the SA drone industry?
Okay, I'll give that one to Kim, as Kim sits part of the board of COASA. So she is part of the development or part of the conversation of the categorization, which we are hoping to see in the near future, I might say.
Who's asked the question, may I ask?
I believe that is anonymous, Kim.
Okay. So according to what I understand, a member state of ICAO voluntarily is part of ICAO, and the regulations that we promulgate in South Africa, and how we roll that out, if we're a member state, would follow those annexures, but we can make that local. So I don't know yet what that's going to look like. We don't know yet exactly how we're going to roll that out. I don't know exactly what the question's getting at, but suffice to say, we're not just going to copy and paste what other countries have done. It just isn't going to work for South Africa, and that doesn't serve us. So we've taken the framework, we've taken what exists, and I guess as an industry, we're looking at, how that can be most easily rolled out. And those elements that I spoke about around drone ID, drone registration, and UTM or separation, etc., all of that has to still be figured out. And where do current operators fit into what category? So I don't really, you can repeat the question. I'm not sure I've answered the question, but yeah, I hope I don't know if I understood the question properly.
Well, perhaps, Kim, what we can do is we can ask the user, since they are anonymous, to send us an email. And then what we can do is we can always set up a meeting to run through the categorization process also on our side and with you. So we could also look at that.
Look, the point is it's not been established yet. Nothing's been promulgated yet. So we don't know. The intention is there to have some form of categorization. I don't know yet what it's going to look like.
Okay. So I see we have run out of time, so I'm going to take 2 more questions here. And then please, anyone on the call, still feel free to send us an email. We're happy to assist from our side. Kapono, this is more on a insurance-related matter. I've read stories of drones being used by insurers in the US to do building inspections, such as checking building conditions, area risks, etc. Any idea if South African insurers are planning something similar?
Yes, I do note on the radio there are a couple of SA insurers who are already using drones for claims inspection purposes, and I do note that some brokers as well are taking on the function to do risk assessments with drones. So it is coming to SA. The brokers, some of those brokers have contacted me and asked what do they actually require for them to operate to operate under the CAA. And mainly, as I did mention, you need a drone. You need the drone to be registered with the South African Civil Aviation. It would go under the corporate banner. So you would also require to fly under an ROC, as well as needing your pilot to be licensed as well. So it is coming in South Africa. Brokers and insurers are seeing the use and the benefit of the technology itself. So it's something quite great. Kim has also raised her hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I mean, it is happening. People are doing it. There are insurers that have licenses. I don't know if they use them. The point is, a drone is a tool, and not everyone uses every tool efficiently. So if it's something that an insurer wants to use, there are ways and means to do it. You can use an existing ROC to execute the work. The output is really around gathering data, with an aerial tool. So it's already happening. We do it. There are insurers that do it directly. Yeah, happy to share more information, but it makes complete sense to do this pre-loss. Have it on file. There are very clever ways to do digital twins. And there's the kind of basic version, and then you would have a before and after in the case of a loss, and it's very, very easy to be able to then compare any kind of state maintenance wise before a loss, and specifically roofs and things that are not always accessible with a visual inspection from the ground. So it's highly effective.
And then last one for the session, yeah, and I think it'd be great if both of you could touch on this, but a question here, how would one know if a drone that is being flown in a residential neighborhood or anywhere else for that matter is a registered or a legal drone?
Shall I go first?
You can go first, Kim.
You don't. You just don't. So, I mean, the theoretical answer would be that a registered drone generally has noticeable markings. But who's to stop you putting stickers on a drone? Do you know what I mean? So ordinarily, you would assume that a small drone is going to be operated by someone within a very small radius. It's probably a neighbor if it's in a small built-up area, neighborhood-wise. I've had a lot of calls where people say this is where the drone is, etc. And then I go into Google Maps, Google Earth, sorry, and I, sit with them and they show me videos, and then I'm like, it's a kid at the school or someone who's using the school ground. So the direct answer is you just wouldn't. There is tech available, hardware, software combination, which through machine learning and computer vision has the ability to identify what kind of drone it is. For example, a Phantom 4 versus a Mavic versus something bigger. But I mean, that is not something that the ordinary resident would have. Yeah, so it's very difficult. It's usually a neighbor. It's usually a neighbor's kid. That's I'm not saying that that's always going to be the case. We see criminals starting to use drones to go and kind of suss out properties. It is a problem,
especially just to add on to what Kim is also noting. It's really difficult, especially you can see the drone but you can't see the operator. So it's really difficult if you were able to pinpoint where the operator is sitting. I think with some of the use case scenarios, some events which we all attend, you'd see a drone and try to look around to see where the operator is. By eye view, you can't even see where the operator is sitting at. So it's quite difficult to actually note and be able to tell if the drone is insured or not, unless obviously the drone is on the ground and you do see an actual ZT number. However, anyone can put a sticker to it. I think this industry for now is dealing with good faith. Commercial operators, as Kim has said, they have noted private operators operating in their airspace. There is a safety concern, which is also coming up as a conversation between the CAA as well as the commercial operators. And as Kim is saying, I think there's an opportunity for machine learning and technology and risk mitigation tools to play in that part, to feed some telemetry information to towers, so you can be able to identify who's operating at which area, and you can have the drone details. But for now, I think we're just dealing with good faith from the commercial operator side. But the criminals are also using the technologies to survey the area in terms of where are the security guys, what is actually happening in that space, and also pinpoint their target at that area. I think, yeah, from that. And I'm also looking at the time from our side. I think if there's any more questions, probably we haven't touched on the questions that has been answered, and people still feel there is more they still need to note, please do drop us an email. You can email me on my email address, kopano@itoo.co.za, as well as Nonhlanhla at itoo.co.za. If you've got any questions that you'd like to communicate directly with Kim, please feel free to ask me. I will share the conversation or the question with Kim. I'll also share her contact details if you still want to conversate even more, or as she did previously mention, there is a lot of area of expertise which UAV Aerial Works has, and you probably like to collaborate with them. Please feel free to contact us. We're happy to collaborate that conversation around. But from iTOO, we'd really like to thank each and every broker who has joined us on this iTOOsday. It was our last iTOOsday for the year, and we do really appreciate your support over the year. We will see you for our next iTOOsday in 2025. Thanks a lot to everyone, and thanks a lot to Kim for joining us on this iTOOsday.